In the last decades, cross-border trade has expanded and supply chains have fragmented and are now being in great part outsourced. This fragmentation of supply chains restructured trade and with it, the global economy as a whole. While many benefits came with the spread of global supply chains, its fragmentation also resulted in a lack of transparency and the increasing risk of criminal infiltration. Customs need to take the lead in standardizing and securing supply chains. WCO needs to pursue the development and deployment of global standards in order to develop secured and trusted supply chains. To achieve this, we need to tackle several aspects that need to be considered in order to promote secured and transparent supply chains. First, security, safety, and law enforcement challenges will be the first challenge that we need to face in a globalized world. Our interconnected and interdependent supply chain became a principal theater for geopolitical competition. Control of strategic trade lanes, ports, rare earth metals, and more recently semiconductors, and even data itself, is creating vulnerabilities that many nation-states find increasingly untenable and seek to counteract. As a result, in the last 10 years, more than 10,000 trade restrictions and tariff provisions have been introduced, reversing a multi-decade trend of trade liberalization. Also, criminal infiltration in our supply chains has blossomed in the underbelly of trade. Transnational criminal organizations erode the safety and integrity and therefore the legitimacy of the sovereignties they straddle. They generate illicit flows on a massive scale and compose gigantic business conglomerates and distributed networks alike. They include drug trafficking cartels, terrorist networks, cyber hacking operations, and numerous other illegal organizations. The total proceeds of transnational organized crimes are estimated at $6.2 trillion annually, or nearly 10% of the gross global product. Bribery of corrupt officials is estimated to involve up to $1 trillion. The growing proliferation of cryptocurrencies further shrouds criminal transactions and the individuals and organizations which engaged in them. Fragility is the second aspect I want to highlight. Outsourced and fragmented supply chains became fragile. Consolidation of the ocean shipping business resulted in a few major shipping lines with massive containers shipped dependent on a relative handful of sufficiently deep water ports capable of handling them. When the pandemic hit, the supply chain failed across multiple tiers of production, from raw materials through manufacturing to delivery of finished goods. Container transport costs quintupled in price. Sub-tier manufacturing facilities shut down and were revealed to be single points of failure across the supply chains of the world's biggest businesses and product lines. Port congestions clogged logistic networks. These ripple effects of disruption cascaded through the networks of everything from critical health supplies to automotive to telecommunications. Environmental impacts are the third aspect that we should consider when securing a supply chain. Climate change accelerated dramatically through land use change and the burning of fossil fuels to make and transport the world's goods. The consequences in terms of natural disasters, droughts, and climate displacement are more frequent and now painfully apparent. They occur and worsen year after year with no end in sight. The fourth aspect to consider is labor rights violations. The drive for low-cost goods that characterized the growth of diversified supply chains relocated production into parts of the world with fewer worker protections and, in some cases, a modernized style of slave labor. Corrective action against forced labor need to be in place and should impact global supply chains in that sense for the foreseeable future. The logic of comparative advantage and competition to provide goods and services in a system of mutual benefit will prevail. However, by addressing these four key aspects, we will be able to define secured and trusted global supply chains. With this approach, What will change is the nature of the supply chains, moving from an opaque global economic network to more transparent, collaborative, and trusted ones. WCO must proactively take a leading role in making this happen, and customs administrations will be in the center of its implementation. For this, not only technology, infrastructure, and capacity building is needed, we also need to have leadership and a results-driven approach in order to raise WCO's influence and visibility. But this is the topic of my next video. See you there.